And fundamentally, it's about acceptance. And when you accept yourself, you can actually love yourself. Oh my God, what a concept. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Unstoppable Woman podcast, where we are discussing the divorce. Okay, Sarah and I have tried to figure out what the name of this episode is, because it's really how to have amazing relationships, or like the power of love, or something bigger, different than that. But it is also the divorce episode, because that's the elephant in the room for a lot of women. And what they really want to know about how I move through this aspect of building my life, and how that interacts with my success in my business, and what are the connections and what are not the connections, and all of that. So we've already done, I did the teaching on that in the previous episode, whose name we don't have quite dialed in yet, but will soon. And in this episode, Sarah is going to be doing the unpacking and asking me some more questions around this topic, and I will be answering. So I don't know what her questions are. This will be fun and interesting. So
over to me then.
Yeah, exactly.
So as Amira said, we called this the divorce episode. She literally sent me a recording this past week that said, this is the divorce episode. And I listened to it and I said, divorce is a large part of this, but this is a love episode. This is the episode that talks about owning yourself and being yourself and loving yourself. So my first question, Amira, is do you have any advice, or do you have anything you can share from your own personal experiences in regards to owning who you are and amplifying your self-love?
So is the question how to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Owning who you are and amplifying self-love. So I think the one key thing, I don't know if I would want to give this a lot more thought, Sarah, just so you know. The thing that comes to me right now is fundamentally, I think people are in a place, and it's a larger discussion about why this happens, but they're in an internal dialogue with themselves where they're saying, I'm not wrong, or I need to be right. Those are two sides of sort of the same coin, if you will. But I'm not wrong. They're wrong. They're not. They've done something wrong. I haven't done something wrong, and they're in this strange kind of push-pull about like not wanting to be wrong, because what does that make them? So this comes up in all sorts of ways in your internal thinking. Like just think about the kinds of conversations you have about what just happened with so-and-so. Okay. And you're like, well, they did this, blah, 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 right? That's all being stuck in this paradigm of right, wrong. And when you are stuck in that, you might be saying that someone else is wrong, but by definition, it requires that you think that you could be wrong, and that there is such a thing as you being wrong that you need to defend against. And this causes us to be in a constant defensive mode that is not about loving ourselves. It's constantly saying, I don't want to be seen as wrong or bad. It's being stuck in that mindset and framework. So I think one of the first things that I did, and when I say first, there was a lot of evolution here, okay, was starting to recognize when I was in that paradigm and starting to hold myself to a higher standard of like, well, really, if you wanted to step out of this, what would that look like? Like, how would you approach this? And fundamentally, it's about acceptance. And when you accept yourself, you can actually love yourself. Oh my God, what a concept. Okay. I know. But it was, I say that in a little bit of a mocky tone, but it was mind blowing for me. I had no idea. I really thought I had to like prove myself not wrong or right in order to get love. I was completely stuck to get love. I was completely stuck in that paradigm and stepping out of right, wrong in all sorts of areas of relationships, not just in my love relationship, but all areas, really built a level of acceptance. And then when you're in acceptance, wow, you start liking yourself, and then you can start loving yourself. That is tremendous. So I think that's where it started.
I love that. That's really powerful. And it seems really simple, but I think that that's a block for a lot of people, is the just being able to accept yourself. Related, I think that when you're kind of in that sort of phase where, whether you know it or not, you may not have fully accepted yourself, I think, and you do talk about this in the episode, that you look to other people for that sense of, am I lovable? And this is my security, and this is where I get my acceptance from, is from other people. Can you talk about how to make that shift where your acceptance is no longer reliant on someone else?
Yeah. Oh, that's a big topic, Sarah. I mean, fundamentally, that's the carrot. Here's the carrot that I'm holding up for my clients. That, we're using the business journey to get you there. And quite frankly, I want you to make bank. Okay. Like, I am 100% behind that. Because let's get real here. If you don't feel financially secure, meaning you don't understand how to make money, whenever you want to make money, you don't understand the methodology, that creative process, you will always feel insecure and dependent. You will never feel like you own your life. Okay. So I have a very strong stance that you have to, everyone, whether you're a man or a woman, needs to learn this. Okay. So the bigger topic that I think is really juicy and really interesting is this idea of where security comes from. So let's talk about there's two places I want to go here. One, just recognize that when you were born into this world as a human being, as opposed to a kangaroo or a giraffe or whatever, like a giraffe gets born and like leaps onto their feet and starts eating. Okay. Right. Like, we as little babies would die if there wasn't someone around us. I'm not saying that mama giraffe isn't useful. Okay. But like, as humans, we are absolutely 100% dependent on our parents to feed us, to clothe us, to wipe our butts, right? All of that. And so growing up until you start earning your own money and taking care of yourself and putting a roof over your own head and all of that stuff, your security, your actual survival comes from other people. It actually does. We are dependent. So then we have a subconscious belief that our security comes from other people. Our mother God, our father God gave us life and gave us security. And now what? Okay. Well, now you are a fully grown adult. You know how to make money. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Anyways, you're not going to starve, probably. Okay. Your actual survival is not dependent on someone else. It's dependent on what you do. Okay. And yet we still have this core belief. And then what happens? Then we confuse matters. We think that person, whether they be a potential client, a mentor, a lover, a husband, a wife, whatever, prospective client, did I say that? Yeah, I did. That they are where our security comes from, because we have this belief that it comes from other people. But the truth is that it comes from source through people. It doesn't mean that we don't need other people in our lives, or that we can, there are some hermits out there who love living in a cave and they're all of that. But fundamentally, for most of us, we're in a society, we're social creatures, and we do, money comes from source, but through people. You do need clients. Okay. Love comes from source through people. Okay. Okay. Everything. The book deal comes from source through people, through the agent. Okay. The Emmy comes from source through all these channels that require people, okay? It's not that we're living a life without people, but the supply, the thing that you want, the result that you want, starts first in the unseen. And if you can understand how to create, meaning take something that is an idea and bring it into physical form. Like, we're not going to get too woo-woo here. Like, I love manifestation, I love all of that, but like, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about taking an idea that you have. I want to make more money. How much more? Okay, you want to make X amount more money. Taking that idea and knowing how to bring it into form. Will that money come through people? Absolutely. But it doesn't come from those people. So to bring this in for a landing, it means that we have confused where our security comes from. Okay? It's not coming from other people. It's coming from our ability to understand the creative process. The way that we can call something in from the unseen to the seen. And if you understand that methodology, if you know how to do that and you live it over and over and over and over again, so that you have 100% confidence in your ability to work the creative process, you will not feel insecure anymore.
I love it. I love that we're very much on the same page this morning, because my next question in the list was going to dive a little deeper into security. So we've already gone on to that a little bit. I think that, and you know, like with my background in like nonprofits and going to the developing nations and lot, like I see a lot like where it's extra difficult for especially a woman to create her own security, and it creates some very bad situations. So for me, my own upbringing and the things that I've seen in my life, it is incredibly important to me to be able to create my own security. But I know that a lot of women stay in marriages, situations, because they feel like that's their financial security. Like they can't go out there and do it themselves. They have this concern or this fear that they're going to lose a lifestyle, and they start having visions of living in squander or being homeless or all these silly things. What advice would you give someone who's in that position?
Yeah. So I don't want to be flip about financial security. Okay. If you don't have it right now, you don't have it right now. Don't pretend that you do. Okay. Now, okay, right? Like I'm not saying leave your marriage, money is going to fall from the sky. Oh my God, great. Okay. Like, and by the way, for the record, I said this in the episode, I'm not anti-marriage. I'm not pro-divorce. I'm pro-love. I'm pro-relationships. I'm pro-living your best life and everyone living their best life, including your potential partners or past partners, all of that. Okay. So just need to get that out for the record, because I think people can be really triggered by this and perceive it in a way that says that, but that's not what I'm saying whatsoever. Okay. So if you know that the relationship you're in is not serving you or your partner and is detrimental, you do need to figure out your exit strategy. Sometimes the exit strategy is get the hell out of there today because your life is at risk. Okay. There's violence in the world. We are not going to ignore these things. Okay. It's not just think pretty thoughts and he's not going to beat you anymore. Okay. Let's get real here. So if you're in that kind of situation, you do need to get help. There's lots of services out there. Find someone, find a safe place. Okay. That your physical well-being is so much more important. And those, if you have kids, that's huge. Okay. Now, what if it's just emotionally toxic? You have to really do your own due diligence and figure out, is this so emotionally toxic right now that it's keeping me from making money, showing up and doing my own thing. And therefore I need to get out now. It will be a challenge and I need to figure that out and rise to the occasion. Okay. Not saying it's easy, just so you know, but you're not able to do it within the framework of this relationship. But what if you are able to do it in the framework of this relationship? Then it becomes murkier about whether it's more important to leave now or set up your own financial security before you leave, all sorts of things. And I've had so many conversations with clients about this. In fact, one recently, which I found fascinating, very interesting, and I won't mention names or anything because that's way too private. But she was in a relationship that she was very clear she was leaving, but had to figure out the finances on. And over a good period of time, she pretty much kept with that scenario. And then we had another conversation about it, and I like threw down the ultimatum, and I was like, either go all in and figure it out, or leave, because what you're doing right now, you're not actually creating the business that you want, because it would require you leaving. I mean, that would allow you to leave, and you're ambiguous about that. Okay. So it's this ambiguity in how you're approaching your relationship is causing you to not step up in the way you need to in your business. And that's not okay. So go all in the relationship, and which means you have to step up and be personally responsible, because you're not right now, or you need to decide, I'm leaving without the financial security, and that's going to force the issue of you creating something really viable in your business. Well, I didn't know how that was going to play out, but it played out where they're now all in together. Okay. Totally different relationship in a 24-hour period. Okay. I mean, there was a lot coming up to that point, but in that moment, confronted by the reality of that situation, she was able to make a really powerful decision, and we'll see how it plays out. But I think it's, I think that the financial security piece is such an interesting, there's such an interesting way that it weaves into how women build businesses, what they do, what they say they're going to do or not do, how they spend the family's money. Because oftentimes when you're building a business, you're bootstrapping it and you're using family funds to start it, and what's okay with the husband and what's not okay. And there's all sorts of things that play in, and what kind of partnership are you really going to have, and what kind of communication are you going to really have it. And it's not, I just want to say that it's not one size fits all.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's a really interesting story about someone with kind of the one foot out the door and then just deciding this is the direction I need to go. What a shift that can make, just making a very definitive decision.
Huge.
So I feel like this whole episode should have a trigger warning. The next thing I'm going to ask you is, you touched briefly on, throughout your relationship with your ex, in hindsight, and of course it didn't feel this way at the time because you described this as a very wonderful relationship, but you touched on some of the things where you said that you realized in hindsight you weren't really being fully yourself, or you're making yourself small, or you are giving up your own power, in decisions like how you spent your time and money. Do you have some examples?
It's so hard to get, that was a big honest sigh there, Sarah, because it's hard to go back to that place and really, really feel it and see it from the place that I am now. I mean, one place was around how we decorated the house and how we spent money on decorating the house. And I think one of the reasons it's so hard to go back and say this is because I was very agreeable and complicit in it. I wasn't going, wow, I really don't want to do it like this, but I'm going to do it, right? It was I was agreeing to it because it made sense to me. But now from 2020 hindsight, or even a few months afterwards, I could see, wow, I was compromising to get along in this relationship on how we updated the furniture in the living room, right? Or whatever. And it wasn't that it was so egregious, right? It wasn't like we were so far apart. And yet I can see now in the way I live that when I just do it. I'm like, okay, let's go. We're doing this here, and we're hiring the interior designer, and we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And, I do it at whatever financial level feels appropriate. And we could have been doing that then. That's my style of action. but I was really committed to the relationship and getting along and partnering well. And, there is negotiation, there is compromise in relationships. So it makes it very tricky to understand where you are actually making yourself small and where you're actually and tolerating something that is just not okay with you. And when it's like, no, this is all right. This is just like, I'm all good with this right now. It can continue like this. I'll focus over here. This is what's really important to me. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense. Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's not like in these big, huge things. It's the little compromises. And I think for everyone, you have to evaluate what compromises you're making and whether those are compromises that you're okay with.
Yeah. And one of the questions that was asked of me by my mentor, and he would ask this in seminars and whatnot, he would say, what are you tolerating? I love that question. Okay. And I wrote down my lists, right? I had long lists. Like when I actually asked, I was like, holy smokes, I'm tolerating so much in my life. So I will give that to people. What are you tolerating? And it becomes very clear what oh, that's a toleration. Okay. And when is it a toleration? When is it like, well, I'm compromising there. It's fine. Okay. And you actually do know the difference. Like,
right.
And
to be clear, your tolerations that you were evaluating were not just your relationship, but your life as a whole. Yes.
Correct. So, but then I was tolerating in myself, not making the changes that I wanted to make. Yeah.
Makes sense. I also want to ask, you talk about how you came to the decision to kind of set each other free. And I want to talk about that a little bit because I know that so many relationships, sometimes end in screaming matches and drawn out divorce processes and all this crazy stuff. You had a very honest, loving, respectful conversation in which you guys decided to separate. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that that's something that's difficult for a lot of people to get to. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that went down?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it wasn't just one conversation, but it was fairly quick. It was probably 3 or 4 conversations over the course of a few days. And then initially we decided to separate. And then maybe a week or 2 later, we decided it was actually going to be a divorce. So that said, like making $1 million, you don't do it overnight. Like the decision or the transformation, the flip of that switch can happen in a very short period of time. But up until that point, there's all this stuff that's happening. Okay. So one of the things that I will say is that my ex and I had good communication. Okay. By and large, not 100%. Nobody's perfect, but we had fairly good communication. And I was very committed to showing up in a respectful way, truthfully, honestly, transparently with him. And that didn't start in that conversation. It started long before that. So we had built a level of trust with each other so that we could have an honest conversation without it being a complete decimation of the other person. I'm not saying that getting a divorce doesn't bring up emotions, because it does, or that we didn't have to work through that for each of us. But those conversations were built on trust and respect. And therefore we didn't turn into different people in that conversation. Okay. So we weren't engaged in raging fights. And then suddenly we had a very conscious, amicable conversation, right? It didn't happen like that. It's like we were consistently being respectful, talking through problems in situations, so that when we did have that conversation, it wasn't divergent from how we previously showed up. So, and I'm very proud of that. I think that in many situations, people create, I think I mentioned this in the episode, people create drama in order to point to the drama so that they don't have to take responsibility for actually making the decision to leave. And neither one of us did that. And I'm very happy about that. The other thing that is part of this is that I was very much committed to the process that I teach. And I was in it, and I was in it every day, and I was constantly looking at how quickly I could move through what I needed to move through to get to more life. Okay. And I was working with a mentor who had that same stance. And we had a long conversation after years, again, like it's like one conversation backed up by years of, you know, bringing my ex to seminars, having conversations about it, right? Bringing him into VIP days with me, very much participating in this. And sometimes when partners come in, like I work with a lot of women, and then they bring their male partners, business partners, or male partners who are relationship partners, and sometimes they're both business partners and relationship partners, and they come to a VIP day together. And I'm not saying that you're going to bring your ex, your partner, and get a divorce. Please don't take that away, because most of the time what happens is people get on the same page and beautiful things open up. That's what I have seen. Okay. And this actually, it feels like a beautiful thing opened up for us as well. It doesn't look like staying together in the relationship, but from my perspective, at least, it's a beautiful thing. And so there was a lot of conversation about that relationship and whether we were going to be growing together and what that would look like. And I had a very deep conversation that allowed me to see things that I wasn't seeing previously. Like I got to a new level of awareness, was able to see something that I wasn't seeing previously, spoke to my ex that night and again the next day. And like, I didn't wait. I didn't say, oh, let me think about this. I was like, wow, I saw this awareness. I need to act on it right away. And this is, and again, people are probably going to be triggered by this, but it's the truth of like, when you get a divine download, when you get the truth coming in and it hits you, you can't wait 3 weeks, because your subconscious is going to distract you and you're not going to take action on it. Okay. And then you have to have that conversation again and again and again. So I have learned to close the gap on time and take action right away. And like my client who I mentioned earlier, she got the awareness that she was not stepping in, and like she either had to be in or she had to be out, right? That was a clear awareness. And she went in, and she did that very quickly. So it works in both directions. I'm trying to be very sensitive to people like not thinking that I'm advocating for divorce or separation or leaving or anything like that. It works in both directions. Okay. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's such a good answer, and something that I wanted to expand a little bit on, because I know that it's so funny that there's still a lot of stigma around divorce. And and not that I enjoy that you've gotten a divorce, but I think your divorce story is such a healthy one, because, you know, it did end in a healthy, you know, adult, personal responsibility, respectful, loving way. And I think that that's a beautiful thing when you guys can both sit and say, this is what's best for both of us. Let's take this direction. And that is a beautiful thing. Like, regardless of what a wonderful relationship it was, like, isn't it better to end it that way? Like, I mean, sometimes it's not always possible, but I enjoy your story because it ended in such a loving way.
Thank you. And I will say that for other people, the answer is to work on the relationship, right?
Right.
And that is the answer. So I just want to say that. Okay.
Very fair point. Yes. Like, while that's not this decision for everyone, like, when it is the decision, I love the approach that you guys took. I think that was a very healthy way to do it. All right. We have to end this on the elephant in the room: sex.
Oh. I'm like, what's the elephant? Oh my God.
The elephant is sex. I know that you had a little bit of hesitation about recording this episode, and the number one hesitation was the sex portion. But I think that this is so important, because in my own personal life, I have several women who are like, am I asexual? And maybe they're not, maybe they're just with the wrong person. So I want to talk a little bit about sexuality. I'm wondering if you can talk about how you realize that you are a sexual being, because I know you talked in the episode about how you thought like maybe I'm just like not a sexual person, but you are. And I want to know if you can talk about that a little bit, just realizing that you're a sexual being and stepping into your own sexuality and how this has changed your life and why it's important.
Okay, we'll go there. We went there last weekend in the virtual coffee, and we'll go there again. I'm getting better at this. Let's talk about it. I actually love talking about sex. I think it's really healthy. I think it's really great to pull back the curtain and like express it. And it might not be everyone's story, and someone might not relate to it, but I think it's healthy to have women talking about it so that they can hear possibilities and know what's out there, and find some inspiration if it's the right kind of inspiration for them. So, but I clearly do have a block around this because I'm like, what did she ask me? What's the question? So is the question like, how did I find out that I was sexual, or tell me the question again?
The question was, at what point did you realize that you are a sexual being,
Okay.
and how did you step into owning that sexuality?
Okay. Pretty much immediately in the process of making that decision, my sex drive opened up.
Interesting.
It was fascinating. I don't know how to explain that, really. Ask me again in a year or so, and I'll have a very clear conception of that. But from my level of awareness right now, that I was stepping into my truth and choosing to be me, to be a full expression of me. And when I chose that, the channel opened up, because sexual energy is creative energy is sexual energy. And so in choosing to step forward into the truth of who I was, like that next level of more life, it was like the clouds fucking parted. Sorry, you'll have to beep that out. But the clouds parted. Okay. And I was like, all this sexual energy came up, and it was pretty dramatic. And then, I started to explore it. So very soon after moving out and moving cities and being on my own, I started to, not with other people, but by myself, explore my own sexuality and what that meant. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. I kind of like this. And it was, it was fun. I think my sexuality kind of started a little bit morphing the times. Nope, I think I have this right. I'll have to go back and think about that. But I think I started changing how I dressed, buying different clothes. Not like I went into trampy mode, but I was like owning more of my sexual expression, my femininity, my power. I was confident in that. I wasn't trying to hide myself. And so I started wearing clothes that made me feel sexy on a daily basis. Even if no one was around, even if I didn't have a man, it was all for me. And that was something that I advocate for women just in general. And everyone does this differently. But for me, this was a really big deal. It was like, I want to get dressed every morning so that I feel hot, so that I'm turned on, so that I'm in love with myself, and like, this is good, right? And that was super fun. And then I had to like recognize I was getting different attention and how to deal with that attention. And I went through a whole phase of like being hyper aware of male attention and what that meant. And I had to figure out boundaries with sexual energy, and just, kind of walking down the street, being in a restaurant, being at a conference, like just being in this world. Like what is the energy? Like, I don't want to suppress myself, but I also don't want to attract energy that I'm not interested in. And so then I had to be clear, well, what energy am I interested in? And there was a whole conversation around that. Have a lot of conversations with myself. And then I, started having a great relationship and having sex with someone else. And it was freaking next level. And that was really fun. And there's a whole lot to that. And my sexuality evolved quite quickly, and still is evolving. And that's fun. But it started off, my own hands, playing with myself and exploring my own sexuality. I will say, I mentioned this in the Q&A on the Saturday virtual coffee that we did. Like I started learning about this. I took classes, these courses by Kim Aname, which we can link to in the show notes for this. And that was really great. It like opened up my mind. Now, like, let it be known, I had bought many of her courses prior to my divorce, and it wasn't resonating with me. It wasn't opening anything up. But the moment I really stepped into the full self-expression of myself, then I went back and I would listen to the one on couples, which is the one that I had. And I was like, oh, this is amazing, right? And she has one called The Well-Fucked Woman. And I was like, all about that. And it was just great. And I discovered toys and all sorts of fun things. So to your point, yes, when I was in that marriage, I thought I was pretty much, I had a low sex drive, asexual, all of that. And in fact, I'm not. And that's really fun.
Yeah. And I mean, not to say that there aren't people who are in fact asexual, but I think that there are a lot of women who just don't really step into that. I absolutely love, and I know that this was one of your little niggles, but I absolutely love how you answered this, because I think that as you're raising your self-worth, it's going to start raising every part of you. You don't leave a little part in the corner in the cobwebs.
Yeah.
As you start raising that self-worth, it all comes.
I have one more thing to add that just popped in while you were talking. I think that much of our asexuality is suppression of self. And we suppress that because, to your point about that, where we started this episode at the beginning, we're afraid of losing security. Okay? Like, I'm afraid of losing the security of being, I'm not proud of this, but I was afraid of losing the security of that relationship. So I was willing to suppress my sexual energy in order to stay in that relationship, because if I was fully expressed and going for my more life, we would be separating, which is exactly what happened, because we needed to, we were in partnership for a particular reason, and it got to the end of that. And now what? Okay. The other thing that is a big deal for women is trust. And without getting into the details, because that would be too private and I'm not available for that. In hindsight, there were some trust issues that I wasn't really aware that I was still holding on to in the relationship that caused me not to be willing to open up. And I think that's a big deal. I own the responsibility there. And because I didn't work through that, I suppressed myself. Like, it was personally punishing myself, but it's also punishing the relationship and not allowing the trust to happen, all sorts of other things. It's probably a bigger conversation to have than what we can have here. But I just wanted to add that to the mix, because I think it's really, it's an important piece.
I'm glad that you ended that, because ended our episode on that note. I think that's so important. But we're over time.
Uh-oh.
That's a wrap. You want to wrap us up?
Okay, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us and for being part of the Unstoppable Woman community. And thank you, Sarah, for the amazing questions. This was super fun. And I hope everyone got a whole lot out of it. Rock it out. Be unstoppable. Hey, thanks so much for joining us and being part of the Unstoppable Woman movement. We have got a ton of free resources for scaling your business at theunstoppablewoman.com/free stuff. And you can find that link in the description below. So go ahead and check those out. And we'd also love your help in getting our message out to more and more women. If you'd be willing to share this video with all the unstoppable women in your life, that would be fantastic. And while you're at it, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Reviews, likes, and comments are greatly appreciated. We go in and read them all. So thank you for those. And thanks for listening, and be unstoppable.